Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about Apple's App Store because it's full of scams if you didn't know, and you probably didn't. Now, this is coming from the Washington Post. Really, really good reporting here. And here's what's going on. Basically, Apple CEO Tim Cook has a very long history of arguing that Apple needs to control its app distribution on iPhones, iPads, and now Apple TV. Otherwise, the App Store would turn into basically a quote-unquote flea market. But among the 1.8 million apps in the App Store, there are a ton of scams hiding in plain sight. And there are some very interesting examples of this. So, for example, customers for several different VPNs basically are supposed to protect your data, have complained in basically App Store reviews that the apps told the users their devices had been infected by a virus to basically dupe them into downloading and then paying for software that they didn't need. A QR code reader app, for example, that is still in the App Store tricks customers into paying $4.99 a week for a service that is integrated into the default camera app of the iPhone. Some apps fraudulently present themselves as being from major brands such as Amazon and Samsung, and we will get to that as well. Now, of the highest 1,000 grossing apps on the App Store, 2%, almost 2%, 18 of these apps are scams, according to analysis by the Washington Post. Basically, these apps have bilked consumers out of an estimated $48 million during the time that they've been on the App Store, according to market research firm AppFigures. The scale of this problem has never before really been reported, and here we are. What's more, Apple's profits from these apps, basically because they take a cut of up to 30% on all revenue generated from the App Store, and so Apple is getting 30% roughly of that 48 million as they are basically getting scammed. Even more common, according to the Washington Post analysis, are fleeceware apps that use inauthentic customer reviews to move up in basically rankings in the App Store and essentially gives the app legitimacy to convince customers that they will pay, let's say, a higher price for a service usually offered elsewhere by a legitimate app with less customer reviews. 2/3 of those 18 apps have now been removed from the Apple Store. So what happened to the other 4 or 5 is my question. The most valuable company in U.S. history is Apple, and they are facing unprecedented scrutiny right now, thanks to essentially the Fortnite lawsuit, which I'll get to in a moment. But the scrutiny they're facing is basically on how they wield their power, and they're obviously fighting to hold on to this, including that blockbuster trial that I just mentioned. Regulators and competitors have zeroed in on the App Store because, unlike app stores on other mobile operating systems such as Android, Apple Store faces no competition, as it's literally the only way that an owner can essentially download software into their phone unless they decide to jailbreak it or attempt to bypass Apple's restrictions, which is against the policy of Apple that you sign up for when you basically use the App Store and an iPhone. Though Apple keeps a tight grip on the software distribution and payments on its mobile operating system, and so by virtue of that, the App Store is essentially how they are making that massive amount of money, not just selling devices to you, but also profiting off of these apps, scams, or legit. Apple has long maintained exclusive control over its App Store, and they say that it's essential to protecting their customers and that it only basically lets the best apps into the system. So there's 1.8 million apps on the App Store for Apple. Google's got way, way more because it's much easier to develop and publish on the Android platform. But Apple's monopoly over how consumers access apps can actually create an environment that gives customers a false sense of safety. And I think this is a very important topic, and I will get to that in a minute here. Because Apple doesn't face any major competition, basically many consumers here are locked into using the App Store for iPhones, and therefore there's little incentive for Apple to basically do anything to really improve it, if you think about it. So as an example here, Simon Willison, he's a software engineer and former iOS developer, talking to the Washington Post, recently fell for a scam himself. And basically, he thought he was downloading the Samsung SmartThings, basically a TV remote for his phone, and it basically prompted him to pay $19 for the app. And I quote, "I thought, wow, Samsung has gone downhill. They're nickel and diming me for my remote control." Here's the thing, SmartThings has no spaces in it. This app that was a scam said SmartThings, looked like Samsung, but it was Smart Space Things. And that was the real tell. It turns out the app was pretending to be a genuine Samsung product, and basically his mistake, he says, and I quote, was an assumption that the App Store review process was good. I held Apple in higher regard than I did Samsung. And that is basically the marketing genius of what Apple is. If you think about this, they have been going back for years, even before the iPhone was even in existence, basically saying, well, if you have a Mac computer, you're not going to get a virus. We infect these things all the time. Well, if you have an iPhone, it's super private. They have been caught violating that privacy. They removed in 2015 all of the third-party antivirus apps to actually have an antivirus scanner, from a third party that is probably doing better threat intelligence than Apple is into the phone. You can go and look at any one of those apps, and if you read the fine print on anything from McAfee to Norton to Bitdefender, et cetera, they do everything but actually scan for viruses, even though they're still there. This is what we're talking about here, and the point is, it's very similar to my very first TED Talk, which was called Trust Sucks. We trust. And by virtue of that, we have placed a lot of faith in Apple's ability to basically market us and pound it into our heads that they are safer and more secure and much less of a target. And while sometimes it's true, they're much less of a target, they get hit, they get hacked, we get scammed. You're not better off basically on an iPhone or an Android in this sense. We have to make sure that we are putting that filter of distrust in our brains when we're using our Apple products, because Apple is not bulletproof. They're really not. And a lot of things are coming to light by virtue of this Fortnite lawsuit, and I will be doing a rather large, probably lengthy presentation here, on my daily podcast / video, for Fortnite, for the entire Epic Games. That's the maker, Epic Games versus Apple in court, because we learned quite a bit of how Apple presents itself. Not to mention the fact I just did a video podcast, I want to say a week or two ago, about the dichotomy in Apple right now, where their marketing is saying, yes, we're bulletproof, you can't get infected. And their actual head of product safety is, well, we have to have App Store control because we're overrun by viruses all the time, and that's how we vet. So which is it? This is what we're talking about. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you are probably using the App Store, you are reading reviews, thinking it's legit, trusting that review process, trusting that Apple has essentially your best interest at heart when they are allowing one of those 1.8 million apps to actually be allowed into their App Store for you to download and consume, when they're actually profiting off these things too, and they're not really vetting it in the way that they should be vetting it. Now, you can point fingers at Google and Android and having a more open platform, and that's true. There's basically Google Play is a lot more Wild West, but Google's also not lying to you. They put out security reports. They are updating continuously on this. They're not saying if you have an Android, you're going to be virus-free. Apple is. And I think that's a huge problem. That's a huge disconnect. They've got hot products, they've got expensive products, and others like the Samsungs of the world are continuously nipping at their heels to innovate above and beyond what an Apple is doing, but nevertheless, Apple remains a very dominant brand worldwide. And so by virtue of that, we have to have that filter of distrust. So make sure, if you've got an iPhone, that you are not just reading the reviews, because those can be faked. You're actually making sure that if you're downloading the Samsung SmartThing app, it is actually from Samsung or any other legitimate maker. Make sure you're doing that homework on anything that you're downloading, and that is the news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.